open the pod bay doors.
Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of the Cinematic Traveler Podcast. I am your intrepid movie-exploring host, Chris, and on this episode, I am going to be bringing you a review that is sure to bring me millions of listens. It might crash the whole podcasting system because I know how highly anticipated this review is for this film. There are moments as I walk around over the last few days where people have come up to me and said, Chris, the world famous host of the Cinematic Traveler Podcast, when are you going to give us a review for the Hulu film Amber Alert, directed by Carrie Beleza? That's how I'm going to say it, and starring Hayden Panettiere. Well, I'm here to tell you that I have heard your cries, your pleas, your begs to have a review for this film to listen to. And you could bet your sweet dimpled ass I am going to bring you the best review for Amber Alert in all of the podcast universe. Nay, in all of the universe. But before I do, I need you to do a few favors for me. If you could, whatever you're listening to this episode on, somewhere there is a follow button. If you could please click that, I would greatly appreciate it. It does help me in the show, but it also helps you because you won't miss any more episodes. You can go back and listen to previous episodes. You can hear my amazing reviews in my sexy, sexy voice. Also, if you would like to leave me some reviews and ratings, I'd appreciate that as well. You can also share my podcast with all of your friends on social media. You can also follow me on social media. I am on Instagram at Cinematic Traveler Pod. You can also find me on X or Twitter at CMT Pod. I'm also on Blue Sky. I think that one's at Cinematic Traveler Pod something. I also have an email address, thecinematictravelerpod@gmail.com, that you can get in touch with me as well. So you'll have plenty of opportunities to follow the show, get in touch with me, and continue to demand reviews for these highly anticipated films. And now that I've gotten that out of the way quick, fast, and in a hurry, and just to make you wait for this review, God, I know, I'm just keeping you on the line here, just dangling the bait of my review for Amber Alert to keep you all excited with anticipation. But before I get there, let me ask you, how are you doing, my beloved listener? I hope that you are doing well in 2025 and that you are braced in for this roller coaster ride that has already started very early on in the year. So I don't have anything else to say, but should I drag this out longer to keep you waiting for the review for Amber Alert? I know it's driving you crazy. I know you're probably in traffic swerving around, or you're at work or the gym just frustrated as hell, screaming my name, which is always wonderful, and demanding that I give you this. Okay, all right, I'll stop messing around now. I'm in a weird mood tonight, and I know that this isn't really going to get a whole lot of listens, and that makes it a whole lot more fun. So let's go ahead and talk about Amber Alert, again, directed by Carrie Beleza. I don't know if that's how you say it. I like saying it that way. A director who I haven't seen any of their other movies, so this will be my first foray into their filmography. Now, before I get into everything, I do have to over-explain a couple of things. I am going to give you a spoiler-free review as well as a spoiler-free plot synopsis. Inside that plot synopsis, I have hidden 2 movie quotes. Yes, 2 movie quotes. If you can identify the movie they're from and get in touch with me through the various means that I have already told you about, I will give you a point for each one that you get right. And at the end of the month, I add up all the points to see who wins, and they get to pick a film for me to review next month. Or if you are listening only from time to time, you can still participate and play the game. I know it sounds uncool, but it's okay. You can be uncool with Chris, because that is everybody's favorite time of the week, is to be uncool with Chris. Let's talk Amber Alert. We open the film in Louisville, Kentucky, where a black Toyota Camry prowls the local neighborhoods, the driver looking for a child to kidnap. Now, this predator finds his victim in a very young girl playing hide and seek in the park while her mother is busy with her new baby, because clearly that new baby is much more important than her older children. And you know what? Maybe if she'd paid a little more attention to all of her children, this wouldn't have happened. No, okay, I'm off on a little tangent there. Sorry. When the mother realizes what has happened, she calls the police, and an Amber Alert for the black Camry is sent out. At the same time, a young lady, Jacqueline, or Jack for short, played by Hayden Panettiere, I think that's how you say her last name all these years, you think I'd get that right, hops into her not Uber, because they probably don't want to pay Uber for saying that word. She hops at her not Uber ride, driven by Shane, played by Tyler James Williams, and as they are driving along, Jack sees a suspicious car. She asks Shane to get closer, please. Closer. Hint, hint. To the car, and she suspects it's the car the police are looking for. Dun, dun, dun. Since the Toyota Camry is the most popular car in America, apparently, the police are stretched thin. So against their better judgment, Shane and Jack decide to follow the kidnapper, being careful not to go too fast, because if my calculations are correct, when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious shit. Hint, hint. Yeah, I know. I could hear you. How do these have anything to do with this movie? I struggled to find some quotes for this one. But at any rate, they play a game of cat and mouse with this kidnapper, and they finally find him at his house out in the middle of nowhere. Since apparently there are no police officers in Kentucky, our dynamic duo take it into their own hands to try to save this young girl. Now, do they save her, or will the kidnapper have to find 2 more cages to put his new victims in? Well, I will not answer those questions and spoil Amber Alert for you, but as I mentioned, I am going to give you the best, probably only review for Amber Alert in the podcast, nay, in all of the universe. So if you are new to the show or haven't listened in a while, I do break my reviews down into 3 segments: the good, the bad, and the nitpicky. The good are the things that I like in the movie. The bad, obviously things that I don't. And the nitpicky, these are things that are neither good nor bad, just little Hollywoodisms or weird things that my weird brain picks out that make me laugh. And as I am trying to do with this podcast, I'd like to make you laugh, as well as educate you on which movies you should go see. And hopefully I am doing an amazing job at both. Hopefully. We know I am. God, I hate being humble. What's the point? So moving into the good of Amber Alert. Oh boy, here we go. I will say I'm going to give the movie credit for some things here. The beginning of the movie, I think, has a nice setup for what it is. I think the way that Carrie Beleza, God, I just love saying that last name. I love the way that he kind of sets up this car. It's almost like a shark. And you see it prowling for victims, and some of them get away, and when he finally finds this girl. But it's kind of a cool little lead up to the kidnapping that kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat. Although I will say, he's got this doll in the front seat of his car, and that's what lures the kids in. It's about the creepiest damn doll ever. I don't think a kid would walk up to that doll. Maybe get a dog or a little puppy or something. Bag of candy, that would have worked on me. Hell, that still would work on me. If somebody rolled up to me right now with a bag of candy in the car and said, come on, hop in, I would do it. Especially with those Reese's cups. But at any rate, I do like that setup, as well as when Jack and Shane discover the car and they make that decision to go after the car, because it's a tough decision to make, because it's like they're not police officers and they know that. And as I mentioned in my plot synopsis, it just seems like there's never a cop around in this movie. So they have to make that sort of decision. What would you do in that situation? Would you go, okay, well, we'll just let the police handle it, or I'll stay with them until the police get here? So it's one of those fun scenarios to put yourself into. And I think the build up to finding the car, and very early on, some of the, I said cat and mouse, but it's Well, I'll get to that in a minute. But some of the thrills of the chase, as it were, they play pretty well for this movie. Also, I do like the end. I have a few issues with it that, like I said, I'll get to, but they find this creepy house out in the middle of nowhere, and it's like some house that you would see it like if you went on like one of those haunted houses they have at Halloween that's set up to scare you. This is kind of the same place. It got like all these creepy dolls and these weird rooms, and it's in the dark or it's in the shadows. Again, it gets you on the edge of your seat because the killer's in there trying to track them down, and he knows they're in there, but they think he doesn't, and they're trying to find the girl. I also think there's some pretty cool setup with that where when they enter into the house, instead of it basically telling you how busy this guy has been doing that, they show it with like there's a bunch of shoes from kids in this one room, and then he has some pictures in these photo albums that he keeps, and there's a bunch of photo albums. So instead of just being like, oh, this guy must have done many kidnappings, they just kind of show it to you. The show don't tell, and I kind of appreciated that at that moment in the movie. So I will say, for what it is, the beginning and the end are decent in this film. At least it has a good setup and a good payoff. The performances, really, you only have to worry about Hayden Panettiere and Tyler James Williams, and I think they're fine. I was not expecting some sort of Oscar worthy performances by either actor. I do like both of them. Tyler James Williams, he's been around forever. He was in Everybody Hates Chris, which some days feels like the truth, but he's been around in so many different things, and he always gives a strong performance in whatever he's in. And Hayden Panettiere, I mean, of course, she's been around forever. I've always had a little thing for her, but I like short, curvy girls. So I got my weaknesses, my kryptonite in life, as it were. But I think they have a good enough chemistry in the film, and they give good enough performances to at least keep you invested. Mostly. I'll get into a few things here quickly, but I don't think either one of them puts in a really bad performances. It's serviceable for what this movie is. As I mentioned, they get along pretty well, so you kind of buy into them making these decisions that they have to make. And, eventually Shane kind of goes along with Jack. He doesn't want to at first because he has this ex-wife and he has a son and he needs to get to see him, but he understands the situation. And after reluctantly, like, no, I can't. Okay, finally he buys in and they're all in together. So yeah, you believe them as heroes in this movie. And my last positive for this movie, and this might be the quickest episode of this podcast ever. This movie is an hour and a half long, and it was on Hulu, so it took very little effort and wasted very little of my time. So let's go ahead and move into the bad of the film. Oh, Lord, Amber Alert. This is the tropiest of tropey movies that you will ever see trope along. While the premise is pretty cool, you have the typical stuff in these movies. You have them almost getting caught at certain points. I will say I should have put this in the positives, but there's a moment where they are following this car, and it is obvious. They're the only two cars on the road. It is so obvious. And about the time I was like, wait a minute, the killer does pull off to the side of the road, and they have this little confrontation with each other. It's supposed to be all suspenseful stuff, but for the most part, you're like, okay, I know what's gonna happen. Like, there's a point where she's trying to see if the kid's in the car, and you're like, oh, is she gonna get caught? The same thing when they get to the house. It's sort of the typical, okay, they're in this room, where's the killer, is he gonna find them, and all that stuff. So yeah, there's nothing new or original there. I mentioned that there's no cops in this movie. Well, there's cops. They show Kevin Dunn. He plays a police officer in charge of the 911 office. But that's the most police you see in the movie till like the very end. But yeah, the whole time I'm watching this movie, I'm like, okay, I understand there's a reason, and I don't want to give anything away, why the police are in a different area. But I don't think every police officer in the whole of Kentucky, or at least Louisville, would be in this one. They would still have to send people out. If they did it that way, crime would be rampant, because all you'd have to do is put in a call and send them, 1 or 2 people out. If they did it that way, crime would be rampant, because all you'd have to do is put in a call and send them 1 or 2 people out. to the other side of town, you could rob a bank or something. You know what I mean? It was getting a bit ridiculous by the end of the movie. I'm like, okay, where the hell are the police at this point in the movie? Especially when they get to the house. There are things that I'm not giving away on how they figure stuff out and conveniences where it's like, okay, at this point, someone in authority needs to be like, okay, we're headed that way. And I already mentioned the creepy house, and it is scary. I'll give them credit for that. As a grown-ass man, I would be terrified walking around in that house. But at the same time, it's tropey. I would say, and unfortunately, I have gone down the rabbit hole of many a serial killer documentary. Most of them kind of lived like in a normal suburban house that had a room somewhere that was the room, you know what I mean? This one, it's like the whole house. It like screams serial killer house. But again, there's so many tropes in this movie that it feels redundant at a certain point. Oh, and God, I don't know if this is giving anything away. I did mention that they're following the car pretty closely, and then the killer sort of pulls off to the side of the road, and they have a, I guess, kind of confrontation where they're trying to pretend like they're not following him, but they are, and they got to, he comes out of the car and stuff. And I almost think this movie would have worked better if you never really even saw the killer. Like I said earlier on, when it's just the car, I kind of like that. It felt like it was a shark, you know what I mean? It was just this predator prowling around. And then when they're following the car, it felt more exciting, as much as this movie could be, because he's in this car with these tinted windows so you can't see in, and it makes it a little more thrilling because you don't see the driver, so your imagination is sort of taking over at that point. But once he sort of gets revealed, it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, there's the killer. All right, we know now. So yeah, I wish they wouldn't. Like I said, I wish they would not have shown him through the whole movie. They could have gone the whole movie and not had him at all, and that would have made it, to me, a little creepier, a little scarier, have him hidden in the shadows at the house or something like that. That would have been a little more fun, at least. And while I will give the movie some credit for the beginning and the end, and it's trying to build suspense, and even though as I mentioned, we've seen all of this before, at least it's trying, and it kind of is paced in an exciting-ish way, or at least paced in a way to keep your attention. It definitely hits a big lull right in the middle of the movie. There's sort of a quiet scene where you have to find out about Jack, or Hayden Panettiere, her character. You have to find out about her history. And then they reiterate Shane's history, which we already know through various calls he gets from his ex-wife, what his situation. But then we have to hear about it all over again. So really, any momentum you have at the beginning just dies in the middle of this movie. And by the time it ramps back up, you're already kind of tuning out. You know what I mean? This is the very definition of a two-screen movie where you're kind of playing on your phone and it's on the background. Or what's the other way they put a folding laundry movie, where if you're doing something like folding your laundry, it's good to have on the background or something, because you don't really have to pay that much attention to this movie. If you could pick it up very quickly once you kind of zone in on it, but then once you go somewhere else and your brain starts to wander like mine does, then it's kind of easy to come back to the movie. So, I mean, I could go on with a lot of negative. There's a lot of this movie that I guess I'll get to my final verdict, but there's a lot of this movie that can be picked apart. I don't understand. Is that how the Amber Alert system works the way it does in this movie? They have it like to where you could channel it to one person. I don't know. It kind of seemed weird how it was handled. But at any rate, I don't really want to waste much more time on this film. Let's move into the nitpicky. And again, these are things that are neither good nor bad, just little Hollywoodisms or weird things I see in a movie that make me laugh. I don't think this is going to be very long either. I will say there's a point in the movie where they first encounter the killer and they see him from afar, and he's kind of putting, I think, this overshirt on or something. And you can see he's got his gun in the holster in his waistband, like back there. And there's a point where Jack, Hayden Panettiere, is like, well, he could be suspicious because he has a gun. And Shane's like, this is Kentucky. Everybody's got a gun. And I couldn't help but laugh at that line. I'm like, yep, that's the South, baby. You can't go, he's suspicious because he has a gun, because we all have them. You might say he's suspicious because he only has one gun. That might raise some red flags. And I'm sure Kentucky, ooh, yeah. So yeah, I got a good kick out of that one. And this is really my final nitpick for this movie. As I mentioned, Shane isn't too excited to be joining in this adventure. Eventually, he does decide, yes, I gotta help this girl out. But at the same time, Jack Hayden Pantiere's character, I think I've said her name about 12 different ways in this episode. But at any rate, she's determined and she keeps talking him into things. And as I mentioned, there's that point where they have the confrontation. Not really, I gotta keep calling it a confrontation. They have this meeting sort of kind of thing with the killer, and they know he has a gun. And she keeps kind of pushing things and pushing things. I'm like, that's about right. There are many men who have had to get into fights or chase after serial killers because the woman in their life just wouldn't let it go. It was like that. What's that Key and Peele? They had those two characters where he was dating her and she was always getting him into these fights and arguments. So yeah, I couldn't help but laugh because she kept pushing, especially at that one point in the movie, because they know he has a gun and they're out there in the middle of nowhere and she just keeps pushing it. I was like, yeah, Shane knows in his head the first person that the serial killer is going to kill is going to be me, not her. He's coming after me first. So maybe you could tell from that and my review how I'm going with this film. So my final verdict, and this is a streaming service movie, so I'm going to grade it a little bit on a curve because I had zero expectations for the film. I just thought it looked like it would be a fun, interesting concept. And it kind of sort of is, but it's very average. You know, it's kind of right in the middle. It's just a meh movie. As I mentioned, you could be playing on your phone or doing something on your laptop or doing chores or whatever around the house and have this on in the background and kind of watch the beginning and do whatever in the middle and come back to the end, and you can pick up on it pretty quick. So it's not changing anything in cinematic history here with this film. And it wasn't so bad that I wanted to tear into it. It wasn't one of those movies where I got halfway into it and I was like, oh, I'm going to fuck this movie up on the podcast this week. It was just average. And I would feel bad really going full on angry, bitter old man movie critic on this movie because, like I said, the concept's pretty good. It kind of at the beginning, it draws you in. You're like, okay, well, what would I do in that situation? And then it goes, okay, well, we're going to do everything you've seen in every other thriller movie like this that you've ever seen. So we're not even going to try new or different things. And when it hits that middle point, oh my God, I zoned out. I think I was on my phone a few times. And that's why my review is probably quicker than normal. So ultimately, I would tell you just pass on Amber Alert, despite the adorable Hayden Panettiere being in it. And I know she's had a tough stretch a few years back, so I'm glad she's kind of back in movies again. Just wish she would pick better roles. But yeah, you're not missing anything with this one. I wish they would have if they would have just streamed, I'd hate to say streamlined, it was only an hour and a half long. If they'd have just found a way to maybe ramp up the pacing or the tension or something, just keep it moving. When they have that moment where it just stops, you feel that in this movie. And I know I'm devoting way too much time to that, but if they'd have just kept it moving, hell, they could have almost gone most of the movie just them chasing these people around in the town and trying to find the car and finding new ways to get around things. That would have been exciting, but I don't know. Instead, it goes by the books and it gets pretty average and boring at certain points. Yeah, I know I'm rambling on. I'm just trying to stretch out the time. So, yeah, just skip Amber Alert. And Hayden, if you're listening, I don't mean to upset you. And if you want to come over and we can have dinner and talk about it, I'm always available for you. And for the rest of you, if you are still listening, then I must have done something right. And if I did, again, please follow, subscribe, rate, review the show, share it with your friends, share it on social media. I would appreciate it. It does help me. It does help the show. I'd really like it to grow and get more audience. If you haven't participated in the movie quote contest, come on. I have other people. We have a tight contest. We have one every month. There's always neck and neck. But you could just come on, join in, let me know you're listening. I know I'm begging at this point because there's only probably 3 or 4 people listening. But I am grateful for you listening. And I tell everyone I know I've got the smartest and sexiest audience in all of the podcast universe. And I'm not lying. I would never lie about that. And you never fail to live up to those high standards. You are smart and sexy. That's a deadly combination. You are going to take over the world. And when you do, tell everybody about the Cinematic Traveler podcast. And as you are traveling around on this blue and green ball, bouncing through the cosmos that you are going to take over, you smart, sexy human being, I need you to do one thing for me. Go out there and do that voodoo that you do so well.
Punch it!